Hey guys, what's going on? So, talked about this before, and it really crystallized for me today. I think last night while I was sleeping. I don't know if I had a dream about it or whatever, or something. But the idea of using, believe it or not, um, barriers, not barriers, but constraints in order to harness your power. And I continue to, well, to believe and start to feel that this is really the case. It came up, I think, maybe last week with my coach. She brought it up for the first time. That really made me aware of it during a joint session with a bunch of us. And she used the analogy of how a river stays within its banks, and without those banks, the river can kind of go wherever it's going to go, and that kind of thing. And I started to think about that and where I can apply it in my life, and really everywhere. So to kind of continue with that analogy, if you have a river and it doesn't really have any banks, for instance, like it just kind of spreads out over a valley, right? Spreads out over a valley. It kind of slows it down. Sort of like, think about the Mississippi River, right? So when the Mississippi, or any river, but when the Mississippi River, the mighty Mississippi River, comes to the edge of the Gulf, it starts to kind of branch off, and tends to probably slow down where there's sediment that's formed. It spreads out more. It spreads out more in these little tributaries and things like that. And what it does is it dilutes its power. And if there were no tributaries and just kind of it spreads out over like a valley or something like that, then the river becomes a pond, maybe, right? And becomes slow moving, very diluted, very deep, but loses all the power, the potential energy. Yeah, let's talk about potential energy or physics for a bit. The potential energy that, not potential energy, it loses its kinetic energy, which is kinetic energy of movement, builds up great potential energy. So now, if you think about a river that has great kinetic energy, it's moving fast, it's very untamed, it's wild, it's rushing down riverbanks. In order to harness that power, because it's just raw power, there's too much of it, too much of a good thing, or not enough of a good thing. But in the case of the river, it's too much of a good thing. So people build dams. The dams block the flow of the river, control the flow of the river. And behind these dams are these huge reservoirs of water with massive amounts of potential energy, or energy that has the potential to do some type of work. And so when the water is released from these dams through the dam itself, great turbines will turn and create electricity, or heat up water, or it'll create electricity through the spinning of the turbines. So that's converting that huge amount of potential energy into a usable form of energy to do some work. And then the river goes down its way. So, making this visual for you guys. So in the same way, our lives are like that too. We are just an amazingly vast, deep ocean. even more so than just a lake, but an ocean of potential energy inside us. But it's all potential. If we just release it, it just becomes unusable. There's just too much of it. Or if we have lots of little tributaries and it just goes off in lots of different directions, again, we get diluted in what we're doing. But if we create structures in our lives where we can harness this huge amount of potential energy in us to do work, to do what we want to do in our lives, to create, to make other people's lives better, to build a life that we want. And we focus that potential energy to create kinetic energy, which is energy of movement or that creates work. That's amazing. But in order for us to do that, we need structures in our lives. We need consistency in our lives. We need, I'm not going to say it, but I have to, standard operating procedures. Or, and those would be applicable in a business or something like that. But even in your life, you use them. Like you have a schedule maybe that you do the same thing every day. You need that consistency. You have a calendar to keep you moving and doing certain things throughout the day. Those are all procedures. That's all constraints that you put in your life in order to get things done that you want to get things done, in order to move and be where you want to be. They're really necessary. It's funny, I spent 26 years in the pharmaceutical industry. And about the majority of that I spent as a compliance auditor. And as a compliance auditor, what I did is one of the main tasks I did was assure that the industry that I was, the scientists that I was working with, used something called standard operating procedures, or SOPs. And I found they were necessary in the industry. They were necessary to provide consistency in the products that were being created. They were necessary to provide consistency and safety in the work that we were doing. They were necessary in providing that consistency so that scientifically things could be duplicated, which is always really important in science, really important in creating a pharmaceutical that provides the same benefit that it would for everybody in the same way, so that there's no acute dangers. There was always danger in any pharmaceutical, taking it for too long or anything like that, but that's kind of a different topic. But so these procedures were needed in the industry, yet I resisted them for so long in my life. I used to go out of my way to go different ways to work. I try not to go the same way all the time to work. I never had any consistency at all. I wouldn't eat the same thing from one day to another. I wouldn't eat at the same time. I wouldn't do the same thing because I wanted to be free. I've always wanted to be free and felt free, and I didn't want to be constrained. I wanted to be a pirate. And I still do that. I still resist that schedules and things that constrain me. But I'm learning to change my story. That's all it is. It's a story. It's a story whether the consistencies in your life serve you or they don't serve you and they constrain you and they hold you captive. Just a story. So I'm changing that story to be that these constraints or these procedures or these, I'm trying to find another word instead of constraints because it has that negative connotation. Feel it. Guidances. They actually help me and they help you because they provide that consistency that you need in order to do the things that you need each day. So if you didn't have that consistency in those schedules and those quote-unquote procedures in your life, habits, yeah, they do, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Mary Beth. So the repetition of the same task over and over and over and over and over again creates a habit in your mind. There's actually a part of your mind, I can't forget the name of it, which is totally responsible for creating habits. And it actually allows us to live, because so many of the things that we do in our lives become habits. For instance, like eating. Do you think consciously every time you have to take a bite of food, of picking up a spoon, how to curve your fingers around the spoon, how to dig in the spoon into whatever you're eating, how to move it to your mouth, wherever your mouth might be, how to open up your mouth. If you had to do that every single time you had to eat, you wouldn't be able to concentrate on anything else in your life, and we probably wouldn't exist. So habits are extremely helpful in that respect, because they allow us to concentrate, take our concentration away from things that we don't need to do, that we do repetitively all the time, and put our concentration on things that we do want to focus on. So habits are very, very helpful. And in a way, procedures, constraints help us form these habits. And they help us with our lives. So, and you get to be better, Mary Beth said, and you get to be better and better at those tasks, correct, because of the repetition over and over and over and over again. And that's actually what practice does for us as well. If we practice any endeavor in our life, like karate, do karate, or knitting, or cooking, or Krav Maga, or whatever it may be in your life, when you practice, you get better and better and better, because you've created a habit, and then those habits reinforce, they physically change the neuroconnections in your brain, something called neuroplasticity, where the connections in your brain will change, and they'll actually physically thicken these connections in your brain to reinforce doing something over and over and over and over again, so that you get better and better and better at it. So that's what habits do for us. And procedures, constraints help us form habits. They help us in our lives. And so, looking at anything, how do habits serve us? I just kind of told you how one way that habits serve us. The opposite, because there's always a good or bad story, I guess, or outcome with anything, any experience that we have in life. So that's how habits serve us. How do habits not serve us? Habits not serve us. Well, actually, you know what? I'm not going to cover that right now. I'm going to cover that tomorrow. That'll be something to talk about tomorrow, because it'll tie really, really, really well in. So let's focus on how habits serve us, because that was my original topic. And I really need to work on that. And I'm sure everybody here does, or many people do, some more than others. But it's a really good thing. So what can you do today that will allow you to build in consistency into your life? For what I did today is I created a standard operating procedure for creating content and distributing it throughout the different media, social media types, because I was getting overwhelmed and anxious about doing it, because it'd be, oh my God, I have to put it here, and oh my God, it's got this task here, and then every time I do it, I have to remember how to do it again. So if I write it down, I have a template to follow in order to do that repetitive task. And it'll get easier and easier and easier. It actually become probably a part of my memory after I do it so many times. And it will allow me to focus on something else. Focus on creating content. Focus on living in my life. Focusing on enjoying life. So I encourage you guys to do that. Create your own template, standing operating procedure, about something that you want to, that's important for you to do, but shouldn't require all your attention to do all the time, or you do it repetitively and it just gets monotonous, and maybe you don't do it because it's a pain in the neck to do, because you forget how to do it and you always have to look it up. Create a procedure, create a template on how you can do it, and it becomes more efficient for you. So that allows you to take your mental, your potential energy, your mental potential energy, if you will, and focus it into that kinetic energy about doing something else that you really want to do. Allows you to harness your power. Bad habits. So you have a question about bad habits. Yeah, bad habits. Kind of in the light of bad habits, regardless of whether they're good or bad, they're habits. Habits are neither good nor bad. They're just habits. We put a label on them and we create a story around our habits. So if we reframe that story of whether we have a good habit or a bad habit, okay, bad habits don't serve us. That's true. Or certain habits don't serve us. There's a whole way of changing habits. There's a really good book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, which I've read. I highly recommend it if people are into reading. That talks about habits. The first thing that you have to find with a habit, there's like 3 steps, I can't remember totally, but one is a cue. So prior to any habit that you have, there's always a cue, or something that causes you to start that habit in your mind. Start that habit, not even. And you can change the cue. You can change the reward. You can interrupt portions of that habit cycle, they call it a habit loop, and change the habit that way. I'll talk about it more in another video, actually, because it's a really, really good topic. Because there's so much of us that are just habits. The other really important thing about habits, which I'll talk about too later, is the importance of, once you build a habit, is to have supporting groups of people and systems around you to help you believe that you can change that habit, or the habit that you have changed will stick. And that's a huge, huge component of creating new habits and having them stick for you. So yeah, so thanks, Mary Beth. And those are 2 topics that I will cover in future videos in more depth. I will cover how to modify your habits, and also, what was the other one? See, I already forgot. How to modify your habits, and also, the other one is the opposite of us having constraints and templates and SOPs in our lives. There's a good part of it that helps us and serves us, but there's also another side of it too, which I want to cover. So cool. So thanks. Do you have any other questions, Mary Beth? I think you're the only one out there. Thanks for chiming in. I appreciate it. It was very helpful. Okay. I'll assume that's a no. Thanks for the likes and for the hearts. And anybody out there, if you see this video, please pass it along to anybody else who you might think it's valuable. Please give me hearts and likes and all that good stuff to encourage me that you like these and that they're helpful for you. And also give me any comments on what you'd like to see in the future. And I'll continue with these. So you guys have a great night, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.